Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. 55 years after the Supreme Court last decided that privacy is not a basic right for citizens, a 9-judge constitution bench returned to the question as it began hearing today a case related to petitions challenging the Aadhaar scheme. A 5-judge bench, including Chief Justice of India J.S. Keher, yesterday said it is essential to decide whether there is right to privacy under the Indian Constitution. We are off the has to be decided by a 9-judge bench. The centre said in court that the right to privacy is not in the Constitution and is not a part of the right to life. But petitions say the right to privacy is inherent in the Constitution. An 8-judge bench in 1954 and 6-judge bench in 1962 had both ruled that there is no right to privacy. Whether they were correct will be decided by a larger bench of 9 judges. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyse if the privacy concerns over Aadhaar are valid. Joining me on the program today are Vikas Singh, former Additional Solicitor General of India. He'll join us in just a bit, of course. Right now with me in the studio is Vinay Kumar, Senior Journalist, Virag Gupta, Advocate of the Supreme Court, and J. Sai Deepak, Advocate of the Delhi High Court. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Virag Gupta, I'd like to begin with you. Are the privacy concerns valid?
No, these are absolute valid, and yesterday Supreme Court has said that right to privacy is there. It may not be expressly there in the Constitution, but it is part of the right to life. And when the government is saying about the previous judgment, now the two things are there. Number one, now these judgments are 6 decades old, and secondly, these judgments were on the issue of surveillance. Now after 6 decades, there is a lot of technological development is there. And in the new era, right to privacy has to be determined. But yesterday, Justice Chelmeswar categorically said that it is very surprising to believe that right to privacy is not there, even if it is not expressly mentioned in the Article 21 of the Constitution, which says about the right to life. And it has to be interpreted by the Supreme Court, this 9-member Constitution bench. Because earlier bench was of 8-judge bench, and they have to determine whether right to life is a fundamental right or not. Now this whole debate, I personally feel, is not required to decide the Aadhaar issue. First of all, right to life is the right to privacy is there. Whether this is a fundamental right or not, it is not required to be determined. Because once it is fundamental right, then you get a remedy under Article 32 and Article 226. But if it is your right, and as per the IT Act, as per the IPC, and as per so many other provisions, right to life is there. The basic issue is how to protect that life, what are the provisions for protection, what are the provisions for the breach if the data breach is there, what are the provisions for the compensation. Now if the government as a custodian is getting the data of the Aadhaar data, right, then government must be responsible, government must be accountable. Sure. Now those are the basic issues for which enough provisions are there, and if right to privacy is fundamental right, or this is a right as per the common law, or this is a statutory right, this is, I think, it is immaterial to determine the safety of the Aadhaar data, and the government as a custodian is accountable that
sure,
whether...
We'll get into the accountability as far as the government is concerned and how safe that data really is in just a bit. But before that, of course, Vinay Kumar, what is the 9-judge bench really going to focus on? What is the key area of focus?
Key area will be, as Viragji was saying, whether right to privacy is a fundamental right or not. This is the question which has been referred to the 9-judge constitution bench of the Supreme Court. And we know law is a very dynamic field and it evolves with time. So circumstances change, times change, and there is a concern among people at large that is it a tool, is Aadhaar a tool for mass surveillance? Your biometrics are with the government. You just key in a number and everything will be crystal clear to the government. But a targeted surveillance is one thing, which is, good for national security and public order, and our law enforcement agencies, they have to resort to such tactics. But a mass surveillance is not desirable. This is the area where these concerns, are in the minds of the people. So these should be addressed. Right to privacy. Why should by just keying a number? Earlier the Supreme Court was deciding whether income tax, filing of income tax returns will be done along with the linking of PAN and Aadhaar. There the government has got a relief that, you know, it is okay to link your PAN with Aadhaar, and it is perfectly fine if you are filing your income tax returns along with the PAN number and with Aadhaar number, which is now mandatory that you have to key in your Aadhaar number. But why should the government know, intrude into areas that how much money you have in your bank accounts, what are your biometrics? Anyway, you have PAN card, you have passports. So these are the questions which are, you know, bothering citizens. That
Sure.
Whether it is a tool of mass surveillance, is confidentiality, will it be maintained? How good are data protection and, you know, the data safety laws in India? So these are the newer areas. But, you know, for the record, you can say 116 crore people have already enrolled for Aadhaar, and so many crore bank accounts have already been linked with PAN. So, and it's a, you know, wonderful tool to deliver services without any corruption, without any middleman. The money goes, the subsidy goes directly into your bank account. So government has been able to save nearly 48,000 crore rupees on that account.
Sure, sure.
So it's not a very totally regressive step, but moving with times, you have to address these concerns also.
You know, Sai Deepak, are these concerns raised by both the panelists, are they valid? Do you believe that, you know, over the last 50, 55 odd years, a lot of things have changed, so it's time to revisit some of these judgments and some of these laws to be abreast with the times?
See, based on my limited understanding of what exactly happening before the Supreme Court, I don't think the Supreme Court is saying that since a position has already been taken, we want to constitute a larger bench to reverse that particular position. In fact, the circumstances in which this particular 9-judge bench is being constituted is actually to understand as to what was the position that was taken in the past, because that position is not coming out very clearly as to whether the Supreme Court in the past judgments that you've just referred to has taken the categorical position that whether privacy is or is not a part of fundamental rights. See, one thing we have to understand is this, at least as far as Article 21 is concerned, it has lent itself to the crafting of the times we live in. So right to life has incorporated within itself right to reputation and whatnot. So I do believe that it's only a question of reflecting what we feel as a country when you read that particular provision and ask ourselves whether this is a right whose time has come and which ought to be recognized. And it's important in the sense.
Has that time come?
I believe so, for reasons. Because when you discuss the issue of privacy, you should not limit yourself only to individual privacy. It has various avatars, various variants, so to speak, such as sir has just referred to the issue of data protection, which is extremely important, not from just an individual standpoint, but a lot of foreign investors are actually asking for it. So I think this is one of the bones of contention between European Union and India in their, I think, their talks with respect to the free trade agreement that was going on. So I think when you speak of privacy or when you discuss privacy, it's important to address it holistically and not just from that standpoint. Having said that, also I do believe that it's important to observe a degree of caution in making conspiratorial allegations or in demonizing a certain venture. So for instance, mass surveillance, and these are terms, yes, of course, these are terms that most of us have heard in the context of the United States, in the context of their judgments. Now, before we throw these words in the context of an Indian discourse, we have to ask ourselves, what exactly does Aadhaar lend itself to? Are we principally against the concept of Aadhaar when, let's say, certain countries have a social security system,
yes,
right? Or are we saying that let us have an infrastructure in place which recognizes a certain right, and along with it comes a few safeguards, and therefore it casts certain obligations on players, both public and private, which means the state and non-state actors, who are helping the facilitation of the implementation of this particular structure. So for me, I think it's important to understand the nuances of this debate, because any discussion on extremes as far as this issue is concerned is seriously problematic. I might just add that one of the reasons, if one were to read the Ashwin Sinha committee report, I think the parliamentary committee report on the issue, it has raised is this. This program, the Aadhaar project, so to speak, lends itself to checking illegal immigration as well as facilitating illegal immigration without proper safeguards.
Right.
So it cuts both ways. Therefore, it has implications for national security.
Virag Gupta has a counter, and then I'm going to go to Vikas Singh, who's joining us on the debate as well.
Let me address all the three issues. Number one, regarding the illegal immigration, there is no safeguard in the Aadhaar. and it has been given to almost 3.5 crore illegal Bangladeshis. So there is no safeguard in giving the Aadhaar number to the foreigners, number one. Number two, when we are talking about the government power, government certainly has lot of power, but there must be the protection to the citizen. When the fundamental rights are there, so government has the power to restrict those those rights. But first of all, government has failed to enact two laws. Number one, privacy, which has been recommended by the Law Commission as per the report of the Justice Shah, and secondly, data protection. Now, I also feel that Supreme Court has also failed to address this issue for the last 2.5 years. When the 2015 this Aadhaar matter came before the court, at that time this constitution bench was to be constituted, and it has been constituted in 2017. So, unless you decide the right to privacy, how can you determine the Aadhaar, whether this WhatsApp issue or whatsoever issues are there? So, first of all, there are to be laws, then the government certainly has the power to bring the schemes like the Aadhaar. But what about the citizen whose privacy is violated or whose data is breached? As per the government report in the Lok Sabha, 210 websites, government websites, are disclosing the Aadhaar numbers of many citizens. We have seen 10 days back a private mobile company has leaked the 3 crore mobile data with the Aadhaar numbers.
Right.
So, what about those persons? What is the remedy with them? So, unless there is a law, how can we get any type of, whether any protection, compensation or whatsoever may be? So, there has to be law, whether it is a fundamental right, whether there is law, but protection and right to privacy, both laws must be enacted by the parliament.
Indeed, the onus definitely should be on the lawmakers at this point in time, and not the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court is in fact taking a look as far as privacy is concerned. Vikas Singh, former additional Solicitor General of India, joins us on the program now. Mr. Singh, how do you look at all these developments? Do you believe that we need a new set of laws first as far as privacy is concerned?
Well, there are two aspects of this issue that is alive today. Firstly is whether the Aadhaar Act, which has been enacted by the Parliament, whether it can be said to be bad as violating some privacy law, and whether privacy law is a fundamental right or not. Now, as far as the privacy, whether it is a fundamental right or not, this issue had specifically arisen when the Constitution was being drafted. In fact, the chairman of the drafting committee, Mr. Ambedkar himself, suggested that privacy should be included as one of the fundamental rights in the fundamental right chapter in the Constitution. But after much debate, it was decided to drop that clause, and it was decided that there should not be any privacy as a fundamental right. So accordingly, to interpret Article 21 to include privacy would, according to me, will be highly fallacious, when the Constitution makers had clearly taken a position that privacy should not be included in the fundamental right. Now, this position was held by the 8 judges of the Supreme Court as early as in 1954, when they said that the 4th Amendment in the US had brought in privacy, but here we categorically decided not to have privacy as a fundamental right, and accordingly it can't be exalted to that position.
Mr. Singh, if I could just add,
By an 8-judge bench.
If I could just add,
Can I complete? Yeah, you can.
Okay. Go ahead.
So it was not proper for 5 judges to straightaway sit in a 9 combination as if the 8 judges, as if the judgment in 8 is wrong. There is an earlier judgment of the Supreme Court which says that reference to larger benches should not be made casually, and a question should be formulated whether the judgment of the larger bench is wrong for some reason, it is doubted by the smaller bench, then and only then a larger bench is to be constituted. And that too, the Supreme Court has also imposed a self-discipline that 5 judges can't straightaway refer to 9, 5 will have to refer to 7, and then if 7 also feel that the 8-judge bench requires reconsideration, then they should formulate the point for reconsideration and then refer it to 9. So this kind of a casual attitude of straightaway saying that, oh, there is a 8-judge, we'll sit in a 9 combination, is not good for the system, because that's now not how the Supreme Court has functioned all these years. So that is one aspect of this matter. Now the second aspect is as far as the data protection. Data protection, even when the matter was being discussed in the Constituent Assembly, they had said that although it should not be a fundamental right, but there should be some statute protecting data protection. And it would be the duty of the Parliament to enact a statute to provide for data protection and to provide for stringent penalty and conviction and even jail term for somebody who violates this data protection, that individual. You can't conceive of a country where you will oppose having some kind of a unique identity or some kind of an identity which ensures that the person who is given that identity is actually that person. It is in this country only that fictitious accounts are quite common. These PAN cards are being issued. One person is getting several PAN cards being issued. You are having shell companies and money is being, important people are having shell companies and money is being routed through shell companies. So all that can be arrested only by this making Aadhaar and also linking Aadhaar to PAN card, linking Aadhaar to the DIN number which a company director is supposed to have. The moment you start doing all this, you will find that all those bogus entries and bogus people who have been in the system will slowly be weeded out. But at the same time, nobody can doubt that this data which is collected over a period of time of individuals need to be scrupulously maintained. You go for a visa today, for any country visa, they all ask for this kind of data.
Your point is well taken. Let me bring in the others into the picture as well.
Only one point.
Okay. No, I'll come to you. I'll come to you. Before that, Sai Deepak. Yeah.
See, just 2 points. One, for the life of me, I fail to understand why is it that we are so cautious about bestowing the right to privacy, the status of a fundamental right. Why is it that we should not differ from, let's say, the founding fathers of the Constitution, so to speak, although the term is not supposed to be used in an Indian context. That's something that's important in the United States. So assume for a moment that the chairman of the drafting committee of the Constitution felt that this was not necessary. I'm just wondering, in the times that we live in, with increasing penetration of all kinds of technologies, is it not a fair expectation on the part of an average citizen to expect the treatment of the right to privacy as a fundamental right? Because merely because it's treated as a fundamental right, it doesn't stop the state from interfering with it. It only means that it comes with certain limited obligations, and it can do so only within the parameters of the Constitution. That's all there is to it. So I don't see why is it that there is a problem there. Second, I would also be very, very cautious about putting all our eggs in the Aadhaar basket, as if that is the single silver bullet that will solve all our law and order
I wanted
issues.
to come to that.
Because I don't think that's really the case. As opposed to focusing on judicial reforms and policing reforms and whatnot, we can't necessarily treat Aadhaar as the one single solution to all our problems. It, of course, could be one of the tools that could be used to address larger issues. But beyond that, if we actually edify it and deify it, then I think we might actually miss out on other important aspects of the ecosystem. That's my submission.
Right. Vinay Kumar, Mr. Singh was pointing out about how there were bogus entries as far as PAN was concerned, and several other things. And, Virag Gupta has rightly pointed out about how there are several fake Aadhaar cards that have been made by, immigrants and people coming from Bangladesh and elsewhere. So what's to say that, this is going to be a foolproof mechanism? It's happening with Aadhaar. It might continue to happen, and it probably will continue to happen.
What he said was not fake Aadhaar cards.
No, he's bogus entries.
Yeah.
As far as PAN is concerned.
Aadhaar cards which were made for Bangladeshis illegal immigrants. Because you have to be very clear that Aadhaar, by having an Aadhaar card, it does not bestow upon you citizenship of the country. So it is no document which will stand scrutiny as a citizenship document. Number two, as Mr. Singh was pointing out, that by linking Aadhaar with PAN and checking misuse of PAN, a person having multiple PANs and having multiple bank accounts and going in for shell companies and all, those things will stop. Certainly, leakage has stopped, that we have seen.
Yes.
And even World Bank, Chief Economist Paul Romer has hailed Aadhaar as the largest and the most sophisticated biometric ID system in the world. So, as Deepak was saying, you cannot denigrate each and every initiative which the government seeks to come up with. But you have to have ample safeguards and ample precautions, and you have to address the the concerns of the citizens. What if you want to register your marriage? You need an Aadhaar card. You want to avail of services of government services, various government services. You need an Aadhaar card. If you are registering a house, you need an Aadhaar card. What if I have a passport and a PAN number and I don't have an Aadhaar? But overarching this, if you are linking mobile with Aadhaar, so citizens have to know, government and the legal sanctity has been given to Aadhaar. So now the next step from the people's point of view and the government's point of view is a foolproof assurance to the citizens,
Sure.
to the people, that your data is not going anywhere. As UIDAI chief has time and again stressed.
Yes, and the government
that
also has time and again said that the data is extremely safe.
Extremely
but in
safe,
spite of
and
that,
it can be
we hear
used-
of leaks. But in spite
Yeah.
of that, we hear of leaks.
Yeah,
We hear of
and
high-profile
it can
leaks
be
as
used
well.
only for the purpose for which it is intended. Suppose you are giving Aadhaar for your bank account. So it has to be, the authentication will only say yes or no. It won't reveal your biometrics. These things have been said, but still there is not that much of awareness about it. It's a good system, but it has to be made foolproof. And
Sure.
you have to also respect, in some way, that why should a citizen's life be as open as as a glass, or be crystal clear to the state? That is the point of intrusion. That
Sure,
is, you are
sure,
intruding into
sure.
someone's a citizen's private life.
Yeah.
Oh,
Right.
That is my concern.
On the other side of the spectrum, Virag Gupta, there are several people who suggest that you're giving out your data all over the place. International organizations like Facebook, Twitter, and everything else have everything that the government also has. So you're, in any case, giving out all that data. So why not give it out to the government?
Some other wrong is happening, so government can't do that wrong. That's why I am saying that government is duty bound to make a law for the data protection. When more than 100 crore mobile phones are there, more than 35 crore people are connected with the internet. So the data has to be protected like Europe and America. So why the data should be exported out of India? So that for that purpose data protection law is required. And I am surprised how the panelists are saying that during the constitution this data protection law was not required, because at that time there was no data at all. Now let us understand this, how the privacy debate is going on, because in 1950 what was the state power? At that time they provided two major laws. Number one, your telephone cannot be taped. Number two, you cannot be raided without any authority of law. So in 1954 and subsequent judgments, what was the issue was whether the government has power to do the surveillance or not. Nowadays, when the technology is entering in your home, government is taking your Aadhaar data, and by that Aadhaar data they are monitoring all your movement. At that time they are intruding into the privacy. At that time right to privacy debate and the law protection is required, because in 1950 this issue was not there, and for other issues there was sufficient protections were there. So what is expected from the parliament? From the Supreme Court it is expected that they should interpret this, they have interpreted so many other things also, right to education, their right, freedom of press and other things. In that manner it has to be interpreted in the Article 21, and the parliament must enact two laws. Number one, on the data protection, and secondly right to privacy, so
Sure.
that sufficient protection are there.
Okay, I'm running out of time, so I'm going to take two quick comments on the program. Yes, Sai Deepak, very quickly.
See, more than the specifics of Aadhaar itself, I think what people perhaps have a problem with is the manner in which its origins began. So, for instance, it started off as an authority under the Planning Commission without any kind of statutory backing. And the Planning Commission itself did not have any kind of statutory backing. That was a creature of somebody's whim. So, considering that, I think the suspicions that started with its origins continue even today.
Sure.
Second, to compare the voluntary submission of information to private websites by a person to mandatory submission of, let's say, information to the state are perhaps two different things. Three, we should also understand that when we have recognized the right to reputation as a fundamental right, and reputation being my personality, my persona, and my projection, privacy is perhaps even more intimate in that particular sense.
Indeed, indeed.
So considering that, I just ask myself, if you have recognized the second degree of separation, what is the basic problem in recognizing the first degree of separation?
Sure.
That's my fundamental
Sure.
question.
Mr. Singh, your closing comments on the program. I'm going to close the show with your conclusion.
Well, firstly, as far as the comment made by somebody that this issue which was debated at the time when the constitution was drafted can be revisited, I agree it can be revisited, but not by the Supreme Court. That can be done only by the Parliament. That is one. And secondly, which the kind of digitization that we have already achieved in our system today, we are all having Google. Whenever you have a smartphone, you have Google. Google has all information of wherever you are traveling, where you are going, all that is all being maintained by them unless you disable. Very few people know how to disable. So it is all there everywhere. You enter an office, your office may require you to have your fingerprints, and that may be the way to access your office, and you know, they will be controlling the entry and exit time on that basis. Now they also have your data. So this kind of data proliferation is already there. Under the Aadhaar Act, there is a section which provides for data protection, and there is a penalty of 3 years conviction if somebody violates that. Probably that needs to be made more stringent, probably that needs to be more effectively monitored, but that is the maximum that a citizen can expect. You can't expect that these kind of Aadhaar type things will not come, and this country will be run the way it has been going in the last couple of years, you know, where all kind of bogus accounts are being there, people are siphoning money, people are rerouting money, shell companies, etc. So all that has to stop, and we have to move forward. And Aadhaar, according to me, is a great initiative of the government, which we must fully appreciate and support.
20 seconds. Yeah.
Only one point, because it was passed as a money bill. So what he is rightly said, that it has to be body corporate to make it accountable as per the IT Act, because you can't make them accountable unless they are the body corporate.
Okay, on that note, then we'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Vikas Singh, Vinay Kumar, Virag Gupta, Jesai, Deepak, thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have today. See you again next time.